Hello guys, and welcome back to I Never Knew That. So if you saw in my last video, the topic I picked was the history of domes in the Middle Ages and in architecture. So I studied about the topic for a week and I'm about to tell you what I learned. So a dome is normally defined as being a hemisphere. However, there has been some slight controversy over what exactly defines a dome, and you can obviously tell that just that being half of a sphere is a very generic definition. So there have been many books written about it, and we're not going to dive exactly into what defines a dome, but we are going to talk about a good bit about domes. So one interesting things about domes is they're often related with or associated with government buildings and churches. The reason for that is that government buildings are often fairly large, and a dome, one thing about a dome is it can hold its own weight without the need for a strut or a support or a buttress or a pillar to hold it up. So you can use it to cover that large area without many supports and thus take away some of the area of that space. And the same goes for churches and cathedrals because they were such a large building. That's kind of one thing that domes have been associated with throughout architecture, and that really started in the Middle Ages, and then modern day government buildings have just been carrying on the legacy of having a dome over the building. So back in the Middle Ages, some of the earliest domes, and this is actually dating back before the Middle Ages, the domes were built using mud bricks. Later on, they went to being built more with wood, and since wood was flexible and lighter, it was a whole lot easier to build, but wood would degrade in weather, so what they had to do was either use copper or lead sheeting, which they had at the time to cover it and protect it. But this still isn't completely evolved to where domes were in the Middle Ages. So in the Middle Ages, that is where you got to actually building the domes with bricks, and they haven't really moved much from that actually. So it's a brick dome and it can hold its own weight and just pushing outwards, and the dome can support itself. So there are a lot of famous examples of domes in the Middle Ages, but we're just going to talk about a few. One very important one was St. Mark's Basilica. St. Mark's Basilica was actually built somewhere between 1063 and 1072, and it actually has 5 domes on it. There's one dome in the middle, and then 4 domes around it in each of the 4 sides. Anyway, if you go about 350 years after St. Mark's Basilica, then there was another very famous dome, and one of the most famous domes ever built. It was Brunelleschi's dome, which was built on top of the Florence Cathedral. The Florence Cathedral was actually built somewhere between 1420 and 1436. So the dome of this cathedral is actually the largest masonry dome ever built, even to this day. It's 148 feet wide, and there were a lot of challenges that went into building the dome. So one of the challenges, it was actually a little bit of a competition. They were trying to build a dome which did not use any external buttresses to prevent the dome from spreading outwards and eventually collapsing, as many large domes would do at that time. So what they did was they actually hired this guy, Filippo Brunelleschi, and he had actually never had any previous experience with building a dome before. He had very, very limited architecture experience at all. And what they did was they had this cathedral built, except for the dome, and the base for the dome was a hexagon shape, pretty much, okay? But the problem was, this hexagonal shape did not have a perfect center. So, if you draw the lines bisecting all the vertices, they would not actually line up at one point. So it was not a centered base, and they asked him to build a dome without using buttresses, okay? So here's the problem. You've never built a dome before, and you're supposed to build a dome without buttresses on a base that doesn't even have a center. And what Filippo Brunelleschi did was he actually pretty much defied all the odds and actually built the dome, which is the largest masonry dome ever completed. So the way he did it was he actually built 2 shells. There's an inner shell and an outer shell of brick, and in between them is kind of like a chain interlocking structure of wood and metal bands that wrap around the entire dome and suck it together so it can't expand outwards. And that is how he overcame, the not being able to use a buttress, which would normally prevent it from spreading outward. 2 other big problems that Brunelleschi had when he was building his dome was the dome was so high and big that they actually did not have the machines at the time to really get the equipment and people needed up to the top of the dome to build it. So not only did Brunelleschi have to build and design his dome, he also had to build his own equipment to build the dome with. And another problem he had that's kind of related to this, the dome was so big that they had to let each layer of mortar completely dry when they were laying the bricks. So they can only lay about 1 layer of bricks a week, and at that rate they were only growing 1 foot every month. And at this rate it took the dome 15 years to be completed. But after Filippo Brunelleschi completed his dome, 15 years later, it was the largest masonry dome ever built, and probably one of the most impressive domes ever built. Anyway, he went on to pretty much become a professional dome builder, and he built a lot more domes for many other cathedrals, which included the San Lorenzo and the Pazzi chapels. These Renaissance era domes, like Brunelleschi's and all those chapels he built, they all started out in Italy, and it took about a century after they started out in Italian architecture before they spread to the rest of Europe. Once they did, these domes really caught on in architecture because it's a whole lot better way a more efficient way to be able to cover a large area. Because normally if you had a large area and you need to cover it, you would have to, put your flat roof across it with pillars to hold it up. With the dome, its own weight will hold itself up. But Brunelleschi's dome actually had a fairly large impact on dome building because now pretty much all the domes were built with, brick and then the interlocking structure of metal and wood around the inside to hold the dome together. And Brunelleschi started that with pretty much no previous architecture experience, and that's how he pretty much changed the way domes were built from then to now. And there are many more domes, that were built not just on a circular base. There were hexagonal bases, there were octagonal bases, and there are even some with oval bases, although those were not quite as common to see. But there definitely were some, and the way the polygonal bases would work is you had different segments on each side, and they would extend up till they met at the top. So it was not what you would exactly call a perfect sphere coming up. It was just different sides coming up and meeting at one top point, more like a large hexagonal or octagonal cone instead of actually a sphere. And also around this area, it became popular to put very ornate and elaborate designs on the inside of domes, which you would see more in cathedrals. But it is quite safe to say that domes have really changed the way architecture has been from even the Middle Ages and before then to all the way to now, because they're so efficient at covering a large area. Alright guys, well I hope you enjoyed that, and at the end of every video we pick a new topic to study for the week, and then I will make the video about it next week. So let's pick our topic. Here's all our topics, and we will pick one. And our topic is egg tempera painting. This is going to be interesting actually, because I know someone who actually does this, and we might be able to get them on the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.